Yes.
Okay. So, hey, bikepackers, we're here on the 5th episode of the Bikepack Shop podcast with Tasmanian bikepacker and adventurer Emma Flukes. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Emma?
Oh, gee, that's a pretty open question. I live in Hobart, Tasmania. I am a local to Tasmania, which there's all sorts of jokes about, having two heads and that sort of thing. But I swear I don't. I started riding bikes. I learned to ride bikes as a kid, but I sort of restarted about 7 or 8 years ago. And I started on mountain bikes, and then got a road bike for fitness, and then did all the biking. But yeah,
the
it's
N+1.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. But it's just always been a way to. I've always been quite outdoorsy, and I really enjoy. Tasmania is a real sort of freedom state as far as wilderness, and it's just a really great vehicle for seeing places, doing things. And it's I do the rat racing thing. I work a 9-to-5 job, which is often a lot more than that, as is the case currently. But it's just a great escape. I find as soon as I've got a spare moment, I can just disappear into the hills and
it's
I'm
the
gone.
endless wilderness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good feeling.
It's pretty standard story. Bought more bikes, did one discipline, did lots of disciplines, and I still haven't figured out what I'm into, but pretty much everything.
Yeah, at the moment. Anyway, I've got two little questions to get us started off, which I might make a consistent theme in these podcasts. But what do you think is the most underrated and overrated piece of gear in the bikepacking industry at the moment?
I think the most underrated bit of gear is those chemical hand warmers you get from the pharmacy for I think you can get a 4-pack for about $7. And they're one use only, and it's terrible for the environment. I'm an environmental scientist, so I should care, but they can get you out of trouble in so many cases, and they're so great to tuck into a sleeping bag when it's horrible. Most overrated bit of equipment, anything made by Rafa.
Oh, did he cut that one out? No. That's cool. Yeah, no, can't say I disagree with either of them, so that's great. I think those chemical hand warmers, probably for you more in Tasmania than for me in Brisbane. Like maybe I could have used them today and yesterday, but any other day of the year, they're pretty much useless up here. But down there, I'm guessing it gets, what's the temperature like at the moment?
Oh, we've got, I think probably the whole east coast of Australia is in a cold snap at the moment, but we've got a very, very serious weather event happening over the next few days. We've got pretty low snow on our major mountain around Hobart, Mount Wellington. But this weekend, which happens to be a long weekend, there's big snows forecast. So it's about where I live, which is about 200 meters above sea level. It's probably down to about 2 overnight, but it's a cold 2. It's very wet. And the thing is with those hand warmers, I've found that I sometimes get cold where I can't recover without a direct source of heat, which you can't get with clothing. And so if you just bang one of those up under your top, or sitting on top of your liver or something, it's like a get out of jail free card. Yeah.
For sure.
Because if you can't find a heater, because you're in the middle of nowhere, then it's so good.
Don't you pack a heater with you?
No, this is not solar powered.
Yes. Yeah, no, I'll definitely be taking a few of them for the Hunt 1000 at the end of the year. I don't know.
Highly recommended.
Quite cold up that way. I've never done any bikepacking in Victoria, so.
It's very different because the environment that you're in has its own challenges, and looking after trench foot and that sort of thing, I'm sure, is a big thing. But the cold is just, and snapping your body out of the sort of state where it's cold, that's important to have a way to manage that, because you're not going to die in 6 hours over trench foot, but you will die from hypothermia. So
for sure, especially through those overnights and if you're riding through the night. Okay, well, we'll get onto it. So a bit about your background. What's motivated you to start bikepacking, and what sort of kickstarted that? Because you obviously were riding for a few years before you started bikepacking.
Yeah, so So my background is I started riding mountain bikes. I kind of got bullied into that. I'd always planned to, but I'm a scientist and I was finishing up a PhD, which is, if anyone who's done that, is just like the worst experience of your life. And you have no money and no time, and you just feel guilty about
Are you
doing
getting me
anything.
hyped up?
Oh, the worst. But a friend of mine who organizes stage mountain bike races events rigged a spot prize for an event I did, so that I won an entry to this multi-day stage mountain bike event, and I had no bike at
Which
the
one was
time.
this?
This
Which
was
event?
Hellfire
Oh,
Cup down at Southern Tas. And so I kind of had no money, no time, and thought, well, I can pass up this opportunity or I can get a bike. So I got a bike, which, sent me into poverty, and I lived on $13 a day.
As it does.
Yeah. And so I did that, and I was mountain biking for a couple of years, and I also bought a road bike for fitness. It just so happens that my partner also rides. He has ridden for a very long time. He didn't get me into riding, which is what everyone asks, but he was doing a lot of road riding, and I started doing some longer rides on the road bike. So I did a lot of peaks challenges and, all day on the road bike. And I just really enjoyed spending all day on the bike. And I've just always been a very slow twitch fiber sloth like physiology of a person, and
banging out the pedal strokes.
yeah and at the time, so this is sort of 2017, 18, no one that I knew was really riding a long way on a mountain bike, because you just don't do that because it's a mountain bike.
Yeah, it's not cool.
No, things were very different a few years ago. But the opportunity came up where an event, which I'm sure most people know, called Race to the Rock, was starting in Tasmania, down at Cockle Creek, which is the southern tip of Tasmania. And so going from there to Uluru, which is 3,500 Ks. And I saw that was happening, and I think I'd followed a Tour Divide previously, and dot watched a couple of events. And I thought the concept was really cool, just, surviving on your own, carrying your own stuff, being safe. I grew up and did the usual outdoorsy camping with family and stuff, but I wasn't, really into that sort of thing particularly. But I saw this happen and I thought, how hard can it be? I didn't have a bike for it. So I had a dual suspension mountain bike. I had a road bike, and neither of those would have been a good bike for the event.
Wouldn't really want to use either of them, hey?
No. And I had no idea what bikepacking entailed. There weren't options as far as bags and bikes and equipment and stuff available at the time. You'd be surprised how much it's evolved, especially in Australia since then. But yeah, I basically decided I remember it was on the winter solstice, so June 21st of that year, which is 2018, and the event started on the 1st of September, I think. I decided, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. So I had to buy a bike and buy all the gear in that time. So I did all that, bought a bike off the internet from Canyon.
Just $13 a day.
Yeah. Oh no, by that stage I'd been working for a couple of years, so I had to take out a massive loan. But anyway, bought the stuff and strapped bags on my bike, my hardtail, which was brand new off the internet, and went for one weekend ride. And I slept on a picnic bench under a shelter in the middle of winter in Tassie and didn't die. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Okay, now I can ride to Uluru, no problems.
Yeah, I'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. And so then I fronted up, and that's how I started bikepacking.
Wow, that's really cool. So just like some advice, so someone who was once in your position, what would be like one or two pieces of advice that you'd give them if they were aspiring to do these sort of longer endurance type races?
So probably the thing that I found the most challenging is not so much equipment or physical challenge based. It's about understanding what your body routines are like when you're tired and you're cranky and you're just a bit sick of everything. Because even no matter if you're just touring or racing, there'll be certain times where you have ebbs and flows in a long day of riding. And I started off, I've always been a very night owl kind of person, so I'm often working or doing fun things until 3 o'clock in the morning. That's just what I do. So I always assumed that when I was riding that I'd want to start late, finish late, and that would be my routine. And so Race to the Rock was kind of a baptism by fire for me because I had no idea what I was doing, and I kept trying to do that, and I'd get really sad when the sun came down, and that's the only way I can describe it. I was sad. I wasn't lonely, I wasn't missing anyone or anything, but I just was kind of irate and upset about everything, and the world just seemed really, really crappy. And so then, and that was basically my experience for that event, which was 20 days or whatever it was. But I've since realized that I get sad riding into the night, and what works for me is to get up at midnight or whatever time, whether it's very, very early, and then I stop when the sun goes down. And that routine has just made the world of difference to me as far as just feeling happy and
right. So you sort of keep it a bit earlier, and you'll go to bed a bit earlier, and then you'll get up, say 12 o'clock.
And that works for me, and it definitely wouldn't necessarily work for other people. But my advice would be to just pay attention to how you feel and your body's rhythms, and adjust your routine according to what feels right, not what you think you should be doing or what you expect. Because when I'm riding, I go to bed 6 hours earlier than I do when I'm at home, which is weird. But I also get up 6 hours earlier, which is also weird. So I think it's when you're on the bike or when you're doing whatever sport and you're doing crazy stuff and you're so attuned to what's happening with the sun going up and down, because you don't have artificial lights, you don't have power, you don't have comms. Just pay attention to what your body's telling you and fit with that, and your whole experience will be so much more pleasant. You'll probably be faster, you'll be happy, you'll be safer, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely agree with the emotions being a big part of bikepacking, because a lot of people, they sort of go into it and then they think, oh yeah, I'm just gonna, I'll ride through the first night, I might have a sleep on the second night, but they don't envision themselves actually in that situation where you've ridden all day and you might have done 4,000 meters of climbing or 3,000 meters of climbing, and you got to go into the night and you're by yourself and there's like really nothing around you, and say you go through like your last town at 5:30 p.m. and you pick up a bit of food for the night. The emotions riding out of the town, or even like, for me, sometimes it feels like a physical restraint, like it's wanting to keep me back a bit. It's like, there's danger out there, like what could be happening. And maybe that's because I'm a younger person as well, but definitely the emotions play a big role when you're out by yourself. Like it can be different, because a lot of people do these sort of rides with other people. So I've felt that I've been in two situations on the same route, where I've been by myself riding into the night, and I've been with someone else, and it's just been completely different, because you've got like that reassurance. So you get the other person who can sort of, I don't know, it's not that reassurance, but like you just know it's going to be all right. Like you're with two people, your mind's keeping active. I don't know, do you? Because you don't seem to ride too much with other people. So
no, I do zero riding with other people, so I cannot empathize. But for me, it's I was actually talking to someone about this a couple of days ago, but I guess I'd say I am probably inherently an introvert, but it's more that I've just always done stuff alone, and that's just my default position. And so now if I ride with people, I never ride with people, but if I ride around people or encounter people on the way, I find that quite disconcerting. And I feel really self-conscious, and I don't like to be around people. So I'm sure it would be different if I was, if I started in a different environment, but I don't ride around other people. There is a constant sense of being isolated. And for me, there's never a safety concern, because I'm sure we'll get onto this, but you've got strategies to deal with the safety side of things, but you're very much in your own head, and it's very much all about your experience. And I think I'd find it confusing to be with someone else, because your ebbs and flows in your emotions would be quite different to theirs, but potentially.
Well, you can be like, I don't know, you can sort of be like super excited and super happy. Like there was a point in the last sort of like ultra thing that I did, I guess, like the overnighter, and I think it was about, I don't know, 3 a.m. And I was feeling really good going into this section, like into this creek section. And my mate, he wasn't feeling too crash hot. And I was like, oh well, I'll just sit along. And I know I can tell pretty easily when he's not in the mood to chat. So I was just sitting there, riding along. And then this creek section is like waist deep water, really early in the morning. It's cold and it's not fun. But
cold.
cold, yeah.
Queensland cold.
The 18-degree cold. But yeah, so it's sort of like we almost switched. So I got into the water, and he's a bit taller than me, so it was up a lot higher on me. And I think it sort of just, I don't know, I didn't react well to it, and our moods sort of changed. And it was like he was then starting to feel really good, and he's not as, I don't know, he doesn't really read in to other people's minds as much, and he's like talking like, oh yeah, we can push it on for the next few hours, and I'm just like, oh no, yeah, totally. Yeah, it's I don't know, I do a lot of riding with other people, so I'm pretty much like the opposite, like polar opposite of what you do. I might go out for a few training rides by myself, but yeah, very much on bike packing, I'm always with other people. Yeah, so I don't know, I think in my experience, I just like having someone there to reassure me. But then again, I would like to start doing some stuff by myself. But I am still young, so I guess.
I know. You're such a whippersnapper.
I know, I'm still
yeah.
making my way there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it very much depends on the sort of person you are. For me, there's pros and cons of being around people or being on your own. For most people, having someone else with them is reassuring. It keeps them entertained. You've got that safety net. And for most people, that is going to be an easier way, or a more comfortable and enjoyable way to do things. Look, I can't be sure whether my attitude towards being around people is developed because of how I've always ridden on my own. I'd say it's probably more I was born being a certain way. But for me, it's actually more challenging being around other people. Like I've done a handful of longer, weekend rides with friends, and it's great. Like, it's fun. You
can chat.
You can chat, but I also just get really exhausted, and it's whether you enjoy being in a room full of people and talking to everyone, or you prefer hanging out on your own. And that's a very personal thing. But there's different challenges with each, because you're either dealing with someone else's emotions as well as your own, or you're dealing with the fact that you're in the middle of,
you're in the pits.
You're in the middle of nowhere on your own when shit's gone wrong. So
yeah, there's obviously two different ways. But well, being more of a solo rider, when you do these like races, ride type things, I don't know if you want to call it a race, but do you have, like, obviously you've got to have some sort of goal? Do you base that more off like a time or like a distance each night, or do you base it off where other riders are out on the track as well?
Look, I'll preface this with saying that my if we're going to talk about races, formal events as distinct from the things I do for fun on the weekends. I did Race for the Rock. There's a Tassie event, which I'm sure we'll talk about, called the Tassie Gift. I've done a few times. I've done a couple of Vic Divides. I did a Great Dividing Trail, GDT, in Victoria, but I've not done a heap of, events. My goals, I guess, because when you're off-road, it's very difficult to have distance goals.
Yeah, it can be hard.
Yeah, because you just don't, unless
sometimes you don't know what you're up for.
Exactly, yeah. So for me, it's probably, I don't try and hit time goals. It's more like a feels goal. But I guess there's vague, time. There's a certain duration that I feel comfortable riding in any given day. If it's an established event where it's been run before, you kind of get a feel for what's feasible, possible, and then you can go from there. But if we're talking competition, which is not, super important to me, but I always just do the best I can. Like what's important to me as far as my satisfaction from an event or a race is, if I have ridden the best ride I can do within reason, then I'm stoked. I don't care if I was, first or 10th or 50th or whatever, I'm probably not going to be last. It could be.
Yeah.
But it's based on whether I have ridden the ride as best I can ride the ride. And
well, with I guess with bike packing as well, there's a lot of variables compared to like a stage race. So like you might not be anywhere near the strongest, but you've tactically made the right decisions. You haven't put yourself, you know, into the shits. And yeah, I guess because even so, like you got sick on the last Tassie gift, I believe. Yeah, so it's like stuff like that can happen, and I guess it can completely change how the race is going.
Yeah, and look, I know that you come from a like XC race background, and
roadie
from
racer.
From what I understand, you're pretty handy at it.
Yeah.
And I've never been like, I'm not terrible, but I'm not I'm not going to win any sort of like high octane race situations. But one, I'm a female. Two, I'm very small. Three, I'm just not a super fast rider. So the way that I ride any ride, whether it's bike packing or just like a long day ride or whatever, will be very different to most people. And so back when I was doing road stuff, and I was doing peaks challenges where I was still riding as fast as I could. So a peaks challenge is for people who don't know, it's a roughly a 240k ride. It's organized by Bicycle Network, I think.
I don't even know who organizes it.
I don't even know. But traditionally it was at Falls Creek. It was about 240 Ks, 4,500 meters of climbing, but they also did one down in Tasmania. And the roads are very different, but similar stats. And riding those sort of rides with or alongside people who were, crit racers or, Australian road riders, national road riders, but for short periods of time,
guys.
or the Audax people. It was a real mix of people, and you just never knew where you'd sort of fall out. But yeah, I kind of just plod along with things, and I can't go faster even if I'd wanted to.
It's like the slow twitch.
Yeah,
goes
exactly.
Back to the slow twitch fibers.
Yeah. And so when I'm trying to aspire to a goal for a certain event, I don't. You get caught up in the moment when there's people around you and you're like, oh, I wish I could go that fast, or got to keep up with them. But also, one, I don't like being around people, so I'll either ride ahead of them or behind them. I don't want to be with them. And two, what they're doing has no impact on my performance, because as long as I'm riding the hardest I can ride, then that's the best I can do. And something that, a bit of a segue here, but something that I've thought about quite a bit is the fact that particularly males, but people, people do this across genders. Some people are very explosive, strong, fast, but they have to stop for an extended period of time because they basically cook themselves, or even if they don't, blow up, they need time to recover to be able to ride fast again. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't ride fast. It's just not something my body does. So it's not a strategy per se. But I also, as it turns out, don't need to sleep a lot. And in life, I probably only sleep, 4 or 5 hours is my kind of default because I'm just a busy person. And I don't know, maybe I'd be like a superhuman if I slept for longer, but I don't. So for me, I've bought myself extra time by not having to sleep. And I couldn't go faster even if I wanted to. So I've just got a certain pace that I do, and I wish I could go faster, but I can't. So that's just what I do. And, just try and manage what you got. Yeah, that's right. And manage everything around it. So manage your bike, manage your nutrition, and manage how your body's feeling. Don't break anything along the way. Keep safe. Keep enjoying yourself, and that's about it.
I guess that has a lot to do with the Race to the Rock being, 3,500 or so Ks. There's obviously like a lot of remote sections along, that stretch between, I don't know the route that well. I don't know that area that well, but from, say, what does it go from Tasmania, and then you catch the barge over, where does that go to Melbourne, was it?
Yeah, so that particular route, so you went from Devonport, which is north coast of Tasmania, you went across to Victoria, or to Melbourne, Port Melbourne, and then you just rode the route to Uluru.
And was there a lot of remote sections where you had to pack very smart? Because this is something I've been wondering for a while, and obviously there's a few different strategies to go about it, but
so it's interesting because at the time when I did Race the Rock with literally zero experience, like literally. There was really only one stretch that was of potential, concern to me, which was about, I think it was about 350k, which doesn't sound like much, but it's, it's off-road, slow, it's in sand, where there's nothing, there's no water, there's no food, there's no, I think there's like station, like a cattle station if you go a long way off route, but but that was fine, did it. And I dropped my sunnies because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to put my sunglasses in my helmet when it was dark. They fell out. And so I did a 50k detour to get my sunglasses back. So it was actually 400 k's for me. I didn't have to, but that was important.
The dust sort of killed your eyes.
Yeah, it was more about that trip for me. It was important for me to do it my way. I was riding rapidly within reason, but I was stopping for long periods. I wanted to enjoy the experience. I wanted to experience the places I was going to.
For sure.
But yeah, at the time, that ride, there were very challenging periods where I felt very alone. I always had food because I hoard snacks like a squirrel. But it felt pretty full on. But now, knowing what I do and with the experience I have, every second ride I do in Tassie is more dangerous, challenging, remote. And it's funny, you wouldn't think that in a smaller island like Tasmania, but yeah, there's a lot that's going on out here. I can imagine
it's very, very remote.
Yeah, like I'll do like if there's a long weekend, I'll take a 3-day weekend, and I won't see a person, shop, town. There's always water, but I won't see anything.
It sort of comes to that point where you're like, if I see someone, this is gonna be weird because they're probably up to no good, because why else would they be out here? It's like I don't know, I've been in these situations where it's been like the middle of the night and you're just like, what? Like, I haven't seen a car all night and there's this one car on this dirt road. Like, what are they doing? They can't be anything good.
Yeah, I think I actually find the mainland a lot trickier for that, because Tasmania is relatively sparsely populated. I think we've got a population of about 550,000 across the state, but it's concentrated in a few areas. And so I have before ridden for 3 days, like 500-600 k's without a car, because cars can't access where I'm riding.
Wow.
And that's the state is not that long. The state's, I don't know, 400 k's long, but it's very easy to get into places where cars can't access. So it's interesting, actually. I won't go into the details too much, but I have thought a bit about the knowing what I know now versus what I knew then when I started bikepacking and did Race to the Rock. How different would things be? And so a couple of months ago, just for fun, I rode the Tasmanian section of the Race to the Rock route, admittedly in better weather, just with the gear that I use now, pretending that I was going to ride to Uluru just to see what it was like. One, I hated the route at the time and I still hate the route now, but anyway, I rode the route, and it was so much easier. Everything was just less daunting. I was faster. I was fine at the end. I was planning to ride home, except I hit a wombat and split my elbow.
I remember that.
Another story. But it was just, it was just fine. I just rode for whatever it was, 40 hours or something. And
I remember seeing it. I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Well, that's what I did when I first rode that route. It was really, really bad weather. It was, September in Tasmania. There was snow in the highlands. I didn't really know how to just stop and camp whenever. So I just kept riding because I was fine to keep riding. And then I got really tired the second night because it ran into a second night, but it was just all a bit daunting. And now I've ridden through the night plenty of times. I know that I can just stop in a ditch if I need to. I've got all the gear to stay safe. And it was so, I'm not going to say trivial. It was still hard. But, I made the decision
mentally,
to do
it would have
that.
been a lot easier.
Yeah, like I only decided to do that 2 days beforehand this time, and just loaded up my bike and caught the bus down to Dover, which is, there's not a lot of people down there, rode whatever it was, 50 k's to get to Cockle Creek, slept in a ditch, and then rode north again, and it was fine. So experience counts for so much. And it's not so much experience about being like fit or strong. It's just about understanding your equipment and understanding
100%.
what your body does. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Well, I hear you say sleeping in a ditch a lot, and I have seen, I don't know, I think I saw a photo on your Instagram once of one of your sleep setups. But I don't know, I consider myself pretty like a lightweight packer. I might have like bivy, sleeping bag, and sleeping mat, and that's it. And a lot of people think I'm lightweight, but what would your typical, say you're like stopping for the night, what would your typical camping setup look like? So shelter, do you have a shelter, or do you just use the sleeping bag and the mat sometimes?
So I do have a shelter, which I've never used. But I do, basically the equipment I'm using currently is exactly the same as the equipment I used when I first started day dot bikepacking. I did a lot of internet research because I had a couple of months of time, but I had zero money, so I had to get the sweet bargains, but also get the stuff to stay safe.
The Gumtree deals.
Oh no, it had to be the weird like back of eBay, some odd Japanese warehouse thing, you know.
It's had lying around for 3 years.
Well, the thing is, because so I'm 5'2", which is not like crazy short, but it does mean that full size adult stuff is unnecessarily big. It's not as effective as far as warmth and stuff. So for me to get stuff off Gumtree is very unusual. So I've kind of got to buy, you know, products from legit sales. So my sleep setup is a bivy, but it's a Montbell bivy, which is basically just like a drawstring waterproof breathable bag. It's like a garbage bag with a drawstring basically. And I've got that. I've got a sleeping bag. I've got a good sleeping bag. And I've got an inflatable mat. I use a 3/4 mat because, you know, I'll deal with that, and it's so much smaller. So, and I carry an inflatable pillow. You know, I don't skimp on quality and comfort. But yeah, this whole my bivy and my sleeping bag, I pack up together. I stuff them together into a compression sack. So I basically got them out as one. And then my sleeping mat, I just stuff below my sleeping bag inside my bivy. I blow that up, which is about 15 breaths.
Not a fan of those closed cell phone mats.
No, I'm not. No. And yeah, so for me, it's really tough because I'm a side sleeper. So if you're a back sleeper, count yourself lucky. Your life is so much easier.
Yeah, that's me.
Oh man. Yeah, so I'm a obligate side sleeper. I sleep in sort of the fetal position, so I need space widthwise.
Oh no, yeah.
Oh, it's the worst. And also I have this weird routine where I have to turn over about 85 times before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And yeah,
nice.
It's really, really difficult. And look, it's not great. I don't sleep amazingly. But it keeps me safe, it keeps me warm. And being in a tent wouldn't be that much better, easier. The caveat I put on that is if I was going to stop and, you know, hang out for a long time, it is quite sad just having a bivy, particularly because I don't have like a hoop bivy. I've got no space to hang out in.
Yeah, mine there's like the little like squish on your face type one.
Yeah. So
you get an asthma attack if you zip it up type thing.
well, that's what I have. So because mine is literally a drawstring with a toggle, I'll cinch it up around. If it's really bad, I'll cinch it up. Yeah, everything except my mouth. But yeah, it's very weird how I got into bikepacking, because I started off with, you know, this massive race, which you could ride however you wanted, but also on a very, 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 very small frame bike. I don't have a lot of real estate for putting stuff. And I just wanted to make sure I had the stuff to stay safe, which is what I do. But I had a very racing setup from the get-go. And so I've actually sort of, moderated from there. And I've recently bought a full-size, less baffled sleeping mat. So if I'm doing more luxury tours, I can, you know, maybe use that one.
Use the one that's like 50 grams heavier.
It's just more the size. Like for me, it's not so much the weight, it's the size. Yeah. And same thing, I've got this really, really amazing lightweight tent, but I just don't even know where to put it. Like I'd literally have to get a different bag set up to put more stuff on, because I can't use a front roll because my bike's currently 2x like, and small bars and no head tube.
No clearance.
So, you know, it's not if I'm riding in summer, because I still do these like crazy long rides over weekends throughout the year just for fun. And if I'm riding in summer, that's fine because, you know, I'll pull into somewhere 10, 11 o'clock at night and get going at, 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's great. But in winter, one, it's pretty miserable to hang out in the middle of nowhere by yourself when it's -4. But two, when it gets dark at, 4:30 and not light till 8, it's really kind of sad to have no space to just chill.
Yeah, for sure.
So I don't tend to do as much, like staying in ditches through winter because there's just so much darkness. Because I've tried it and I just get really bored with how much I have to sleep. Because I just can't sleep that long.
Yeah,
I can't sleep more than 7 hours.
Yeah, and then it's like that uncomfortable getting up in the cold, the wet clothes on.
Well, I just can't. I'd happily lay in bed for another 6 hours, but I just can't. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I think it's probably a bit different down where you are, but I feel like with up in Brisbane, if you have like a quality sleeping bag, there's really no reason to have a tent. Like even the other day, it was last weekend, it was probably one of the colder nights that we've had this year in winter anyway. I think it was maybe 7 or 8 degrees. So probably not cold for your standard, but for us, that's like freezing. I was on top of this like really exposed ridge. So it was really, really windy. And I was just in my sleeping bag with the bivvy halfway down. Now I've got it up, so it's like around my face because that's how I like. That's how I like it. And I don't like all the critters coming into my bag, so I get paranoid about that. But I was so warm, so I don't know. Like I think, especially for up where we are, you see a lot of people with tents. I just think in my sort of mind, I come from a racing background, obviously, but I don't see the point in it because you're lugging it around all day. And we've got a few pretty decent hills, especially on my BPS 600 route. Like it's pretty damn hilly. And if I can, save, I don't know how much it would be, maybe a bit under a kilo of weight, that would be sitting on my handlebars. I happily do that. I'd much rather, I'm not sleeping for that long anyway. So I'd much rather be in a toasty warm bag and spend more money on the bag than, getting the super nice luxury lightweight tent. I just don't see the point in it.
Yeah, look, it very much depends on what you're planning to do with how you're riding. So for me, I don't really, look, preface it, I'm a very type A personality, and I probably have ADHD, but never,
Undiagnosed.
Yeah.
Self-diagnosed ADHD.
Look, I just don't. I can't sit still. I don't know what to do with downtime. I've got to have something going on, and so if I'm not riding or sleeping, I just don't know what to do with my time. And so I don't need a place to hang out. I ride till I want to sleep and then I get going again. But if you're trying to do the touring thing where you're stopping for, I don't know, 12, 16 hours at a time. I don't know how long. I don't know what tourists do. But it is, it's pretty unpleasant to not have a space. And that's what the only thing I'd say as far as shelters, tents, is having an actual enclosed space where your body heat is heating the area, and you've got enough space to, like, you're probably not bringing a book, but you might be reading on your phone, you might be doing something. That's really the only limitation of my garbage bag bivvy. But the other thing I would say is that I try and target, if I'm going to sleep in a ditch, i.e. all the time.
Sort of fun sleeping in a ditch. I don't know, like it's exciting.
come down to Tassie and say it's fun. It's there's different challenges, but I do try and find some sort of overhead environment. I don't necessarily mean like an actual shelter, but just, if you're in a pine plantation, they often provide good coverage, or you just learn to read the environment. And it's not necessarily specific to where you are, but for example, things I have learned are that people, if they're hiking, they like to camp around, rivers or creeks because there's a water source. You use that for cooking. I don't carry anything for cooking. I just don't. I just carry food. And so I don't need a water source. I just pick up water as I go and make sure that I have enough when I've stopped for the night. And rivers in Tassie collect so much wet air overnight that, you're just, all your gear is going to be soaking wet, and no matter how good your no matter how waterproof your bivvy or your tent is, you're going to get condensation on your sleeping bags and on your clothes when there's just wet air around you. And so just little things like finding a river, filling up, and then riding like 100 or 200 meters elevation, or even, I don't know how hilly you are, but 50 meters beyond that up. That makes a massive difference. And even if it means that you're not camping in the nice little camping, designated area, but you're camping just literally off the side of the road, it'll make your life so much more pleasant because you've got the water benefit and you're not in the dank air. And I've made that mistake many times before because I just try and do I've always tried to emulate what other people do. And then I realized that that's not necessary.
This is weird.
Yeah. No good.
This is not me.
No.
Yeah, no, I definitely get, we don't get it that bad. And I don't know, the rain's been pretty bad at the moment, and I guess that's a bit, you can't really help that. It's not many places you can go that are completely in shelter unless you're like riding to a town or something. But I don't know, I haven't really had that experience that much. But
look, it's very different when you're dealing with cold air masses, and I know like there's no way that you can appreciate this from a Queensland perspective, like sure if you go elsewhere, but certainly in Tassie and basically from, I'd say, New South Wales south, when you're going up into the highlands, you'll pass through areas where the temperature will change, I don't know, like 6-7 degrees, but the feels like will probably be 12 degrees different because you get these really like wet air masses that they never shift. And there's places in Tassie that, I go everywhere in any season in Tassie because I know kind of what to expect. But Jesus, places where you just pass through and just hope that your beanie, your hood over your head, your gloves, your 400 layers will just get you through because just the cold that is retained by certain river valleys and stuff, it's crazy. And I don't know if temperature readings would register it. I don't look down, I just keep riding because it's pretty, there's just places that are brutal. Well, it's just, and it sort of sucks the cold from your body. And I do sometimes think about when I'm tootling along on my own in places that are that desperately cold, I do think, what would happen if I got a catastrophic mechanical right here?
Yeah, I've thought about that.
Yeah. But
like, what happens if my wheel snaps in half right now?
Yeah.
It's the one part of riding through the night with no sleeping gear that really scares me is, okay, if I like snap a wheel or snap a frame and I can't move, I'm gonna either have to like, I don't know, somehow pedal my bike to keep myself warm or start running up the hill because I'm gonna, like even in Brisbane, like it's not dangerous, but for us when we're used to 30 plus degree temperatures most of the year, I don't know, it's being in 7-8 degrees can be quite terrifying if something happens, because it is for us, that's really cold. And some of these places that we go do sit in those little valleys, so they have like those cold pockets of air. But I don't know, you would obviously have to plan around it a lot more down in Tasmania.
Look, I think I'm not under any illusions that Tasmania is like super cold by, international standards or anything.
Australian standards it is.
Yeah, look, it's not, it's up there. But I think it's really important to, if you're going anywhere, especially if you're on your own, you need to be comfortable that the equipment that you have is sufficient to keep you safe if something was to go catastrophically wrong with your bike. And I don't mean if there was a medical emergency, if you broke your leg or something. I always travel with an Garmin InReach, and you're crazy if you go anywhere without a means of mobile phone or satellite communication because accidents happen. But if I break all the spokes of my wheel, I'm not going to call the rescue helicopter because I'm not, an asshole. But I need to make sure that I have the stuff to stay safe and stay safe. And that doesn't necessarily mean, stopping dead for the night wherever you are if you're on some high mountain pass. But it means that assuming that you haven't had a medical emergency, because you're going to be dialing out if you have, then with the combination of you making way, whether that's riding your bike or pushing your bike, and the clothes you have available, and the chemical hand warmers if you have them, or the shelter, or the shelter or whatever. You need to be comfortable that you can be safe until the next morning. And it's funny because often those really cold pockets of air are most problematic when you're moving. So the moment you stop, you don't need that much stuff to stay safe. But that for me is always my consideration, because I run very, very, very cold, colder than probably pretty much anyone. So it doesn't mean that I necessarily carry huge amounts of stuff, but I carry smart things, and I test them, and I make sure that I'm comfortable that if I had to be carrying my bike, then, or if I was stopped dead for, a couple of hours because I broke my leg, then I'm not going to die. And that's really what it comes down to, because, it's not fair on anyone to go into an environment where your gear can't cope with all the potential scenarios. It's definitely different if you're in Queensland, where your minimum is 7 or 8.
I can bring absolutely nothing and sit there and shiver for a few hours, and maybe I'll be a bit shattered in the morning, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to die. I can go for a walk or whatever. But I definitely, for someone in Tasmania, what temperatures does it get down to in winter?
Depending on where you are, it can get down to -12.
Yeah, see, I definitely wouldn't be coping in that.
Yeah, no, look, it's basically and it's not that you have to have super, super, super bulky gear either. It's just you have to
Smart
understand
things.
your gear. You have to have smart things, understand layering, understand your gear, understand what you need to snap your body out of being cold. And for me, that is that direct heat source of a chemical hand warmer. And it's really weird. It doesn't matter how much clothes I wear, unless I have a direct heat source, it won't sort of reprogram my brain into thinking I'm warm. And so I guess my recommendation would be, don't go out into stupidly cold weather off the get-go. Underprepared. Just ease your way into it, because dehydration won't kill you over
24 hours.
Well, 24 hours. You've got time, but hypothermia will. So
for sure.
Like snake bites, spider bites, but that's not really a thing. They exist. We live in Australia. It's just a thing.
It's even if you're out on a Sunday stroll, you're still at risk of getting bitten by a snake anywhere in the wilderness, really. In Australia, there's those drop bears and all that crazy stuff.
I don't know what it's like in Queensland, but in Tassie over summer, so we have a lot of tiger snakes, and what's pretty standard. So we've got tigers and browns and whip snakes, and that's it. And they're all venomous, but tigers are really the only ones you see in bulk. And in summer, if I go riding for a day, I'd expect to see 5 to 20. And by see, I mean,
oh wow, really?
Yeah, by see, I mean have to stop for or run over or dodge. Like they're just everywhere. And it's just,
they got nowhere to go, do they? Tasmania.
Well, they just, I guess it's a bit of a wilderness haven here. We're not talking about gravel roads here with vehicles on them. They're all forestry roads where there's no vehicles for, a decade or whatever. So they're just hanging out.
Stuff.
And so, every one of those could kill you, but also they're not trying to take you out. They're not trying to,
unless you like being annoying and riding over them and stuff.
Oh no, that's actually, so hot tip. I'm sure some environmentalists will, or someone will disagree with this, but if you come across a snake or any reptile at the last minute, and you don't think you can dodge them, or if it's a snake, if you go directly in front of their head, then you're putting yourself at massive risk.
Yeah, definitely.
If you can't stop immediately before them, if you just go straight over the top of them.
Well, they can't go up either side, can they?
Well,
not really.
Not if you run over them. So the hot tip is to run over them a bit behind their head and don't break, because as long as you don't break, you're not going to damage their skin. So it's kind of just a compression thing. And my understanding is, I've never gone back and checked, but my understanding is they're totally fine if you just bounce over them.
Don't you have those mad bunny hop skills? You just
No, I have zero skills. But look, the thing is, you don't want to be in a position where you're skidding to a halt or something where your drive side is right in front of their head or something.
Or they get stuck in your wheel, or that's my worst nightmare.
I've heard horror stories of that. I've seen photos.
I would leapfrog off the front of the bike.
No deal.
No deal, no deal. All right. Here's a topic I've been wanting to talk about. It's a bit of a contentious one, but the whole gravel bike versus hardtail. I don't know. Yeah. Ooh. But I know you've got your opinion on it, but I'd like to hear just, I guess obviously it's different in, different regions and different trails, but say for like a 600k forestry road, gravel road type event, not super rough, but also, you're not riding on smooth, hard packed gravel. Like there is that mixture of forestry roads. Like what would you recommend?
So again, it's very hard to know what forestry roads in any given state are like, because forestry is state managed, and all I can vouch for is Tasmanian forestry roads, which are sometimes fine, sometimes A grade cooked. So I actually I started bikepacking on a hardtail, and that's what I do all my events on. I'm really comfortable with it. It's a 650B because that's what fits me. But I also recently have a gravel bike because my partner bought it for me, which is very generous. Cool. But it's super nice.
So cool.
Yeah, I can't avoid it. But I've taken both to do the sort of riding that I like to do, and I can see the niche for both of them. They both have a purpose. But all I'd say is for a hardtail, in Tasmania, just riding on forestry roads where they're variable quality, and this is not trying to avoid hills, not trying to seek them out, but just there are hills. For me, they're pretty much equivalent speed over. So I actually did some controlled tests over a loop that I know well. Yeah. So over it's, I don't know, 4.5 hours. It's about 90 Ks ish. And I'm sure someone would be like, oh, I could do that faster. I'm sure you could. But the point is, my times were within a couple of minutes of each other on several attempts with both bikes. But the difference is no one was faster than the other, depended on the wind and that sort of thing. But I finished the ride on the hardtail going, oh, I could do this another 2 times, no problem. I was, I just been doing what I was doing. The gravel bike, I was super beaten up. I felt like I'd just been trying to race. And so I think I would say, again, I've thought about this a lot. If you are a fast, strong rider, there is more of an argument to ride a gravel bike because you can really push the speed of that. But for me, my differential in the speed between like a hardtail mountain bike and with fast tires and a gravel bike, it's a few Ks here and there, but it's not that great. And the difference in how your body feels after being, beaten up on skinnier tires with no suspension and a non-compliant frame versus being on a mountain bike where you're just in a comfortable position for rowdy stuff, it allows you to push so much harder.
Definitely.
So, I can't give if I was recommending someone who had neither bike and they were just getting into this and they said that it was unpredictable terrain, could be a mix of everything, I'd say do a hardtail every time, because you're not, at the end of the day, you want to feel good about where you've ridden, how you're feeling. You want to enjoy the experience. If you're a really, really fast, super twitch fiber, really strong rider and you're comfortable with your bike handling, you might eke a few, minutes, maybe even a few hours out of a gravel bike, but you're going to be flogged by the end of it.
Because I guess like on the other hand, I tend to call myself a fast rider. I do a lot of training and a bit of racing. You're definitely a
fast rider, by the
way. I've just recently bought a TCX, which is like Giant's cyclocross gravel type thing, which fits I think like 45 mil tires in it. But traditionally I've been riding my hardtail, which is like a Merida, top of the line Merida XC race bike, which I've sort of bikepacking converted into like an adventure rig. And I also had the steel bike as well, which was real rough. But but every time, and just the hardtail, especially on multiple days when you're riding, say 12, 13, 14, 15 hours each day, it's a lot more forgiving. So I find that it can sort of almost take the speed away from the gravel bike after, second, third day, because you're you're buggered. Like I remember, I've only had this bike for like a month, so keep in mind I haven't done anything huge on it. But even after riding some rough stuff on the weekend, just descending back down on the second day, I could already feel it in my arms because I'm used to a mountain bike suspension, but it does take a toll on your body. And yeah, just mountain bikes are more capable. And when you're sort of like, you might be riding at night and you're riding through sketchy terrain, it might be a steep hill, or it might be wombats in the way, or something crazy like that. It's more capable, and it can sort of get you out of trouble a bit easier than on the gravel bike, because they're obviously a lot more twitchy.
Look, absolutely. I would say that if you consider yourself, I hate the term, but if you consider yourself an adventure rider, and you're riding places that you are not necessarily, you don't know everything about the route you're riding, just do it on a hardtail. You can pump up your tires, you can run fast, fast rubber. But if you just want to ride, I think we're a bit confused by the whole unbanned gravel, American gravel racing scene, because gravel in the States is very different to gravel in Australia, or it can be. Like my understanding is they don't have the same sort of forestry, mining, hydroelectric, crappy service roads that we do in Australia. So they're either sealed, or they're groomed gravel, or they're single double track. And
it doesn't
all the
look
gravel,
like that out remote. Hasn't been touched for a year.
That's right. Yeah, the gravel, well, you say a year, for me it's like 15 years, but yeah. So the gravel racing in the States, which is what a lot of the bike designs are around, is based on gravel that's designed for vehicles, and by vehicles I mean 2-wheel drive vehicles. Whereas certainly in Tassie, a vast quantity of the gravel roads, if you can get a vehicle up, are 4-wheel drive accessible things. And yeah, like I've done the maths, because I'm a massive nerd, on the the speed differential that I would forecast being on a go fast gravel bike versus a hardtail with fast rolling tires over a let's say a 200k day, which is pretty bog standard for if you're doing a racy thing with a bit of elevation. And I've come to the conclusion that I could ride for so much longer on the hardtail versus the gravel bike, because my body would be in much better condition, that more than makes up for the speed loss, 1-2 k's an hour.
I think the hardtail frames are also designed a bit more around not so much comfort but capability, because they're obviously getting ridden down a lot scarier stuff, so the geometry is probably going to be a bit more slack. And absolutely. The frames might be a bit more forgiving as well. So we're just talking like stock standard, so mainstream bikes here, but usually you would find that on a hardtail it's definitely going to be a lot more slack as well. So it's when you're riding for that length of time, being hunched over on those sort of like cyclocross race bikes, even though I love that position, can be really uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I've actually got, so my hardtail is I bought it in 2018, but I think it's a 2017 or 16 geometry. So it's older geometry. It's pretty steep for it. It's very steep for a
not even 67 degrees. Like, what do you...
Oh no, it's 69.5 actually.
Yeah.
Which is actually steeper than my gravel bike.
Oh really?
So yeah.
Wow.
And that's just geometry
evolution. Cool.
Yeah. And partly it's because I'm always on small frames, you get weird stuff happening. So, I can't vouch for the bog standard frame sizes, but I tend to get in older model bikes, they're always weird because they couldn't figure out how to put wheels under the bike. And that's why I'm on 650 wheels on my hardtail. But it's not just about that. It's not, and I'm fully slammed on my hardtail. I've got no spaces. It's a cross-country race hardtail, but it's just different, and there's no question that when you're in the drops on a gravel bike, you're definitely more aero than, me on flat bars on a mountain bike. Pushing into a headwind is a very sad affair to witness. But yeah, there's certainly a place for gravel bikes. I really enjoy riding my gravel bike, but for me, my gravel bike's basically replaced I haven't taken my roadie out for 2 years. It lives on the trainer, which is gross.
You're real into the Zwift riding, hey?
Oh, I hate it. But look, yeah. No, I'm a very I work way too much, given that I should be a 9-to-5er, but I'm more like a 6 to midnighter at the moment. And yeah, it's just the trainer's a way to maintain some fitness. But yeah, I just got jack of road riding because I just knew too many people who'd been killed or maimed by vehicles. I was riding my road bike more and more on well-groomed gravel roads. It's basically the equivalent of a giant Defy. It's a live bike. It's pretty old, but it's got 28 mil tires, which is massive at the time. So I happily ride it on gravel, but you've got to ride sealed stuff to get to gravel. And now I've got a gravel bike. I've just put the road bike in the bin, gone, you know what, life's too short to lose a leg.
Hit by a car.
Yeah. And it's just, it's going to happen. It's only a matter of time, man. It's a really sad thing to acknowledge, but certainly in Tassie, it's terrible.
I don't know. Yeah, right. Because I was going to say, I don't really know how it is in Tassie, but in Brisbane, it's like my local hill's Mount Cootha, and it's, just 2 k's away. And I don't think I've been up that hill without getting past either easily within half a meter or yelled at or beeped or like, I don't know, they're just overly aggressive. They'll pass through the blind corners, and it's sort of like, well, if you hit someone, I'm going to feel responsible because I'm riding and you're passing me in a blind corner. Like, people ride these hills really quickly, and it can get very quickly out of control.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, it's not so much a matter of whether you're entitled to having security, safety on the road as a cyclist. That's great, but if you die or end up in a wheelchair,
it's a bit of an inconvenience.
It's great to be right. But it's I think it's probably the same across Australia. There's multiple social studies on it, but I suspect it's a combination of people being time poor, people being distracted drivers, on their phones, and just we've got short attention spans these days. Everyone's used to social media, Twitter. I don't know how many characters I'm on Twitter, but I think it's like 140 character attention span. It's people just don't like being held up for a second, and it only takes being hit by one car once in the wrong way to kill you, or you're in a wheelchair. And so it's just for me, it's an unacceptable risk.
Off-road bikepacking is so cool.
It's the business.
How cool is that? It's like you ride for like 40 hours and you're on a road for a little bit of time, but you're out remote anyway, so it's like you see someone, you just pop off the side. That's what I do anyway.
Look, and this is probably something that you're planning on broaching anyway, but as far as the remote solo off-road bikepacking thing goes, you've got different strategies that you can implement to keep yourself safe. So the primary one is obviously a device that will allow you to communicate regardless of reception status.
When you're out of range.
And so it depends on where you are in Australia, but for me, probably 85% of where I'm riding is no range.
Because we have pretty good here in Queensland. Like in my local, not local, but like my route that I host the event on, it's pretty well, like I think maybe 30% of it doesn't have reception, so it's like it's pretty good. It's still remote, but
it's not remote though, is it? Got phone reception.
It's remote in the fact that you'll go the whole night without seeing anyone, which is remote for being close to the city. But maybe you're coming from a different viewpoint, I guess.
Oh, of course. And it absolutely depends on even within a state, like regionally, there's big variations. But if you take cars out of the equation, then there's only a handful of sort of safety, like mitigation strategies that you have to worry about. One is the ability to communicate. One is the ability to fix stuff on your bike if things go wrong. And I'm pretty bad for that. But that's based on, for me, it's a risk matrix of stuff that has gone wrong and stuff that's likely to go wrong versus the weight of carrying stuff. So that's like a different consideration. And one is I'd say the equipment to stay safe as far as like thermal stuff, and also just the mental fortitude to deal with highs and lows, because people do genuinely call a rescue helicopter when they feel like things are unmanageable, but if they waited till daylight it would be okay. So it's a combination. It's a combination of just knowing your equipment, knowing what is okay and what's not okay, and being able to fix your bike if you can, or if you can't, keeping safe till daylight when you could maybe phone a friend, or if you really can't, then getting out of there. But it's all a risk matrix, I guess. And for someone who's just starting out, I'd say don't dive in and follow what more seasoned off-grid riders do, because it might be comfortable for them, but they're doing that based on what they have experienced and what they've decided is right for them. And look, I know that as a 50 kilo, not particularly aggressive rider, my bike, maintenance, safety, equipment, spares kit is going to be very different to a 110 kilo, like 100%. Rowdy rider. And like I remember when I rode Race to the Rock, I had all sorts of spares that people were like, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to have this. And I have NV rims on my hardtail just because they were super cheap from Pushies at the time.
Were they the internal spokes? Were they the
internal spokes? Yeah, that's the thing. And so everyone's like, oh, you can't do that, you've got to carry spare spokes. And I was like, you know what?
I'm not going to be able to fix it if it does happen.
Well, look, even so the only time I've broken a spoke, I was going to say it's never happened, but it happened once this summer when I took a massive, massive, massive stack and my bike flew, I'd approximate 12 meters in the air above me, and then landed straight down on a rock, and a rock punched straight through the spoke and just snapped one spoke.
One spoke?
One spoke. And if I'd had tubes, which I just wasn't carrying because it was a day trip, it would have been fine. But as it was, I had a broken spoke and I couldn't seal tubeless or whatever. But, that was a day ride. If it was an event, I'd always have a tube, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But the point is, I don't worry about breaking spokes because of my rider weight profile, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're you're
not very likely to punch through a few spokes, No,
and look, what I'd say is, so I've had a few bikes. Well, I've actually had 2 carbon mountain bike frames that have broken. I'm not saying I've broken because I literally didn't. They just broke.
Both I was just riding along.
Both broke. One broke on the first ride out.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Actually, my current hardtail broke. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not good.
Lemon. And my Julie, which I learned to ride on, broke within the first 6 months of literally learning to ride a bike. Yeah. So I think I've probably just been the most unlucky person in the world. Both were obviously replaced on warranty immediately. But if I was to go on that risk profile, I've broken 2 frames. I'm not carrying a spare frame. I've broken 1 spoke. I'm not carrying a spare spoke.
That like carbon patch kit or whatever.
I
carbon
actually
repair kit.
I did for Race to the Rock, which is bizarre because I just honestly, if I broke carbon anything on my bike, I just keep riding because carbon takes a long time to actually go.
Yeah, unless it's on your handlebars, then that's a bit different. But
that's the other thing. I don't carry spare handlebars. So.
Yeah, or stem or cranks or
no,
not into it.
No.
All right. Yeah. Well, I thought I'd like sap out a bit of your technical knowledge and your tips and advice. I'm just looking at like remote riding. Obviously, you're pretty good at that. How do you source your water? So is there a lot of creeks in Tassie? Do you find that you have limited space on your bike, being quite a small frame? Like, where do you store most of your water?
Yeah, so I have my setup on my bike is so I don't use a frame bag. I don't use a water bladder. I hate water bladders.
You got the like mini frame.
Yeah, super small. Yeah, well, because it's a race hardtail and it's a size that actually fits me. So other thing is I'm very short torso, so I'm 160 centimeters, but I ride a frame that's probably like a 155 centimeter person generally because my dimensions. So my frame triangle doesn't have a lot of capacity if I was to put a frame bag on that bike. So I just don't, because I really enjoy having a water bottle versus the having the bladder and all that complexity. So I've got a bottle in my frame triangle, and I've got one on the down tube. Hot tip for young players, probably most people know this, but you can just zip tie a bottle cage to your down tube. You just need one of those bottle cage extender things. Lots of brands do them. Just a little metal thing with boss bolt things. You bolt your bottle cage into it, and you zip tie it on, and maybe a few wraps of electrical tape, and that's bomber. And
yeah, well, one of my friends has actually put a piece of handlebar tape behind a water bottle cage, and then just strapped that to the rubber like protector on the down tube of his carbon bike, and just strapped it straight on with electrical tape, and it's held up fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Like as long as you have compounds that are sticky, I use I think it's brand mentioning, but I think for me it's there's a toe peak bottle cage extender, which is just a little metal thing. And the reason I like that is because it's got a couple of notches in it which are not intended for any sort of strapping, but they happen to fit a zip tie perfectly. So I've had this bottle cage extender on my down tube since 2018 with zip ties and electrical tape, and I've never replaced any of it. I just leave it there. So,
you just left it on.
Yeah, left it on. Even if I do occasionally I do like not bike packing races where I don't need 2 bottles, and I just take the bottle cage off and leave all that like electrical tape and shit on.
Yeah, just leave it on.
What is that? Yeah.
It's like it's my setup, bro.
So for me, it's I think I've got an 800 and a 700 ml bottle. Most people could take 1 liter on both in those positions. Just for me, it's my tiny frame. It's important that if you're putting a frame on the down tube, that if you're running a suspension fork, you let all the air out of your fork and fully compress it, and make sure your tire can't touch your bottle. So for me, if I put a 1 liter bottle on my down tube, if I fully compress my suspension, which I suspect I never do, but I could touch my bottle. And
you've got the 650B wheels as well. Hey, that would give a bit more clearance.
Yeah. So my bike, the reason I have my current bike is because it handles like a full-size adult bike should do. But if you're sort of a small size frame where you've got 29er wheels, you're going to have weird things like seat bag clearance issues, and potentially
because I really struggle to fit much of a bottle on my down tube.
Really?
Yeah, because I've got 29er wheels and I'm on a medium frame. I'm not that tall. Like I'm like 178, which is, I don't know, pretty average, but like I ride a smaller bike, so I ride a medium to 29er. Maybe it's just the Boss placements on the down tube of the frame, but I can only get like a 500 mil.
Have you got Boss bolts on your down tube?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'd say that if you wanted to relocate a cage further down and not use the bolts, then you could probably clear bigger.
Yeah. There is a bit of the frame is a bit weird. This is the Julie. There's a bit of a curve on it, so it's, I guess you have to situate it a bit higher. You can't really run it on the curve, obviously. But I don't know. I'm not really in the situation where I need both on my Julie anyway. I don't really do that much stuff over like 6 hours on the Julie. So
so for me, it's basically, let's say 1.5 liters ish of water. And in Tassie, that's fine. I do have to be pretty careful with. I know that I can do about 6 hours off that, but that's that's hilly. So, but it's very dependent on your own physiology, and I've sort of taught myself to be very water efficient if I have to be. So my default is, if I'm not sure about where water's going to be, I do go into camel mode.
100%.
Yeah, but you've got to be comfortable with that. Like some people go through a liter an hour, and that's not wrong. It's just what your body needs. But you can teach. Well, I certainly can teach myself to be efficient. And the other thing is, I always carry chlorine tabs with me. Always.
They're really important.
Yeah, so I went down the whole process of, you've got to carry, everyone said you had to carry a water filter and you've got to carry treatment tabs and blah, blah, blah. And I have never in my life used my water filter, because the thing is with water filters, in case anyone doesn't know, if you have water that has bad stuff in it, you can treat it with chlorine tablets. Yes, it tastes bad. Yes, you've got to leave it for half an hour to do the job. Yes, you don't want to be drinking exclusively that water, because it will like rot your guts basically. But for a one-off, it's fine. If the water has a lot of particulates in it, so it's full of algae or mud or something, then the chlorine tablets won't work, because they'll be absorbed by the physical particulates in the water. But if the water is clearish, so if you're in an agricultural area and there's a stream and you know there's probably going to be, Giardia and all sorts of stuff from the cows upstream, but it's clear, it's fine. Chlorine tablets are fine. And
so it's more like the sediment that's in it, like the mud that it absorbs the tab.
Yeah. So it's not that the actual mud sediment is like necessarily problematic for you.
Yeah.
But that will absorb the action of the chlorine tablets will attach, they'll bind to those sediments. So if you've got clear water or clearish, chlorine tablets are fine. If you've got really turbid's the term for it. If you've got turbid water, you do need to have a filter, but that's just not the case in Tassie. Like you might have little trickles that come out of the moss that you have to hold a water bottle under it for 5 minutes to get a bottle, and there might be a dead animal just upstream, but it's still clear. So, you can still treat it. So I always carry them, rarely use them, like twice a year maybe. But that's because I know the area. Whereas when the first time I rode the Victoria Divide, which is a 550k
awesome looking route.
Yeah, it's great. It's basically it's very similar terrain and experience to what I'm used to in Tassie, but just with a few more shops and towns around. Really, really cool route. I had to fill up because I hadn't planned for where any water was. I filled up alongside a dam, and it was just a tap that said don't drink, boil water only, whatever. In Tassie, I'd usually ignore that because I know where the water's come from. I'd come down a really rowdy descent, and my treatment tabs had fallen out of my top tube. Well, because I had these I had the Revelet feed bags, and they've got
they got the mesh.
Well, they don't have the mesh. They've got mesh side pockets, but I put my stuff in the front pocket, which has got a little drainage hole. I've since glued fly screen into them, but so I lost I lost the tabs there, and I was like, I'd be right, it's fine, I do all this stuff in Tassie all the time. And I got pretty sick just after I finished that ride. Like that was going to the night. I can't attribute it to that water necessarily, but I got pretty sick, and I reckon that was what it was. So if you don't know the environment, you don't know the water sources, if it's not coming from a legit water source, just drop a chlorine tab in it, but you just need to allow yourself half an hour for them to work.
For sure. There's not, I don't know, in my opinion, in Queensland anyway, I sort of think like if I'm going to bother to actually bring them and use them, like it's only half an hour you've got to wait, and it could save you spewing your guts out.
And the thing is, for me, I'm very lucky because I have a sort of a feel for how things are in Tassie, and if anything is, my general rule is if it's below a potential source of agriculture, so where there's going to be cows or sheep or whatever, and I'm picking up from a stream there, I'll treat it. But for me in Tassie, with the way that farming is orientated, I'll usually just go, okay, I'll just wait till I know that I'm above any source of agriculture.
Sure.
If there was a dead wallaby in the stream directly above, that would be a problem. But the chances of that
less chances.
So low. Whereas agriculture is going to be a big killer.
Like you're in one specific spot on the creek, like it's pretty low chance that it's gonna,
Well, look, one thing that I would say is we don't need to talk about this particular event, but when I got very, very sick in Tassie Gift last year for not water related things, I suspect. I still don't really know.
Yeah, because you didn't know what happened, hey?
No, look, I picked, basically I didn't test positive for anything, but I suspect I picked up a bacterial infection bug, gastro effectively at some point. Who knows where, could have been food, whatever. But I got really, really sick, very, like the sickest I've ever been. And I've lived in Southeast Asia, so it was pretty sick.
You're pretty sick.
I
remember seeing your story and I was like, wow, she's not in a good way.
No, I was it wasn't great. If I wasn't in Tasmania, I would have been calling an ambulance. It was it's pretty unreal. But I needed a lot of water because I was very, 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 very sick. And the water along that area was basically it was actually a sealed road. Not a lot of traffic, but there was just drainage ditches along a not very used but road, and the drainage ditches are filled with roadkill, like a lot of roadkill. And so I would never in a million years usually use water from there, But I was just like, whoa, I'm so sick anyway. I'm about to die. Water is the most important thing to me. And
May as well go all in.
yeah. So I was like, oh, I'm screwed anyway. So I was just scooping up water constantly from there. I drank liters and liters in the space of, 20, 30 Ks from along there, expecting that when I got home, I'd have all sorts of nasty, Giardia plus whatever, in addition to whatever had made me sick.
Yeah.
I had nothing.
Yeah, right.
Nothing. So, that goes to show, here's me drinking trickles directly downstream of a roadkill that I can see, a maned, dismembered wallaby, and it was fine. Didn't pick up anything. So
you probably smell it while you're, picking the water up. It's like, here we go again.
Didn't care. But chlorine tablets are your friend. Just don't have them don't just chug through them, because they will sort of break down your gut lining, and
they're not
quite sensitive to it.
They're not great for you if you're using them all the time, but I guess the once off, it's pretty good. Like, meh.
Yeah, well, the thing is, if the alternative is getting terribly sick, that can be a hospitalization thing. You don't want to take that risk. So yeah.
So with your food, do you tend to bring, obviously bringing a pre-cooked meal can be a bit bulky? Do you use dehydrated meals, or like what I do, which might not be suitable for your more remote riding, but I try and pick up some food along each day. And if I can't, obviously I'll hoard food for the next day or whatever, but I'll try and sort of buy it when I'm out there. So I'm not really going through each day carrying all my supplies. Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I definitely say that wherever you can, pick up along the route, because if you're riding flat terrain, it's no problem. But if you're riding hilly terrain, life just sucks if you're carrying heaps of weight.
Oh yeah.
For me,
or if you're a massive weight weenie like me, it's just like anything over 15 kilos, it's like, nah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I assume it's because you're riding hilly terrain. Maybe you're just like a massive snob, but
I am. Both.
Yeah. So for me, a lot of the time, I don't have shops available. And that's partly because, you might go through towns, but we have a lot of, Tassie's pretty small. We've got a lot of towns that don't have any shops.
Yeah.
So often for me, I think the most I have carried at any one time is 3 dinners worth. Three, so 3 full days and nights worth. I'm very, very lucky. I am very efficient on food, and that's become, I've sort of trained my body to it, but by accident. So I think just based on the more of the sort of really long distance stuff you do, the more efficient your body becomes. And also you become more attuned to what you do need, what you could feasibly need. So for me, my dinner on the go, if I'm packing lots of days worth, all the vegans are going to hate this, but I'll just get wraps, from the supermarket. I'll get sliced cheese, I'll get salami, I'll roll them up into like a long cigar, and I'll glad wrap that.
Yeah,
and
because I've done that.
because all my food, because I don't have a frame bag, all my food goes in my fork bags, which are long and thin. And so like a long thin stick of food is what's most efficient, and I might have 2 or 3 of those for dinner. And it's like they're really calorie dense, and that for me, that's kind of the thing. It's got to be calorie dense, and it's got to be different enough to what I'm eating all day to feel like a different meal, like a dinner meal. But I'm very lucky that when I'm riding, I can literally just eat Cliff Bars. Come on.
Well, I'm so scarred by Cliff Bars. Just every time I have one, I'm bonked, and I'm like, no, never again am I touching this.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
It's I always it's like my last resort. And then I've got that like whole mindset about Cliff Bars. Oh, you're bonked. Don't eat them. Like, yuck.
Well, so other hot tips, the other things that I carry, like it's pretty gross what I carry, right? But it's functional. So I'll also get really like the really crappy hot cross buns from supermarkets, the ones full of preservatives that don't go
squish
stale.
them down a bit as well.
Yeah. So, and you put a big slab of butter in them, and that's the key thing. You need to have. It's really important that whatever you're having is not just sugar and carbs. It's got to have fat, because otherwise you just cook through it really quick. And that's why things like chocolate bars are terrible. And if that's all you can get,
that's like that quick hit, I guess.
So like when I was doing Race to the Rock, when I had no idea what I was doing, when these outback like service stations would have no food and you were just refueling there, I'd buy chocolate bars because I was like, oh, okay, so whatever. And I found that Snickers bars was so much more effective than something like a Mars bar because they've got the peanuts in them.
They got the peanuts in them.
Yeah, so just that little bit of fat made such a difference. So for me, like hot cross buns with big slabs of butter, or pikelets. You've got like sweet sheep
they're pretty good.
pikelets. Yeah. And so for me, pretty much 90% of the time I'm planning a trip where I'm going into the middle of nowhere for 2, 3, 4 days. It's at about 9 p.m. the night before. So I'm just jetting down to the supermarket, buying stuff, chucking it on my bike. Chucking on my bike, chucking my bike in my car, and getting up 2 hours later and driving for 4 hours. So it's not recommended, but stuff that you can
do
buy.
What you can do.
And also you don't get really uptight about, oh, I didn't eat this and then I've wasted this money or whatever.
But I guess that's a big thing as well, because those dehydrated meals, like you're going, say, for a 6-day trip, it's like $100 there, easy.
Well,
you might not even eat one of them.
And the other thing is, if you've got dehydrated meals, you're restricting yourself to staying somewhere where you have water available, and you would hope that you always had water in your drink bottle because you might need that overnight. But for me, because I don't have a lot of carrying capacity on my bike, I find that sometimes I get really thirsty while I'm sleeping and drink a lot overnight. So if I was to have to incorporate carrying extra water beyond a water source to make sure I could rehydrate my meal and also have enough water to drink overnight, that's just another complication.
For sure.
Got food. But it also just depends on how much you eat as a human, what you're comfortable doing that will keep your morale high enough to keep going. For me, I'm quite happy sleeping in ditches, eating Cliff Bars and salami cheese wraps for days on end, and I just am stoked to be out there doing the thing.
What goes really well is the like just the mini wraps. Like I can't remember what they're called. They're something bread. I don't know, they're like in the wrap shape. I should know the name of it. It's pretty common. Someone will probably pick it up. But smeared in peanut butter and Vegemite, and then you just roll them up, and you got like, say, 10 of them. I just strap them to my like handlebar bag, or even to my to my handlebars. I've had it before, and you just got like the little jar of peanut butter, and you just spread it on. And it's really good because it's easy to eat, and you can also pre-make them. Like you can just layer out each one, and then you can rip it out while you're moving.
Yeah, so that's true. That's another
thing. Like that salt hit.
Yeah, that's another thing that I forget about, because I only use these when I'm doing long races, which is basically only as a gift now. Because beyond 2 days. So I call them calorie rolls. I'll just get some multi-grain bread from the supermarket. Got to be multi-grain because that extra stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, put heaps of peanut butter on them. Put a little bit of jam if you want to, if you like the sweet hit thing, and roll them up and Glad wrap. Oh no, first off, you've got to cut the crusts off them, because crusts are unnecessary space. Yeah, and they're not, seriously, they're not effective. And
people laugh at that, but it's true. Like that could, you say you got like 5 of them, that'll take up a decent amount of room. Like that's enough for a little pillow.
Yeah, and that's right. You've got to understand that I have no storage space on my bike, my tiny bike. Yeah. So so cut the crusts off, peanut butter, multigrain bread, a little bit of jam if you want it, but only enough peanut butter so that you can still make a roll from them without breaking the bread through.
Yeah.
And then wrap them in Glad wrap, and then you just get these calorie rolls. And like I could probably do 24 hours riding straight on 4 of those. Yeah. And just do that. So 4 per day is all I would need to eat.
I think it was one of the things that I learned very quickly when I started, because I'm reasonably new to this space. So within like the last 2 years, I've been bikepacking, and for me, like obviously I'm not going to start bikepacking when I'm 16. Like it's like I've been doing it for a while for my age, but that's probably one of the first things I learned, that taking like I don't know, I look back at some of the things that I've took, and I just thought, like, why did I bring that? Like you bring eggs, or you'd bring like, I don't know, like I used to bring like little lamb chops and stuff, or you'd bring like I know, right? Or a mixture of that and like a dehydrated meal, because you think like, oh, what if I need a backup? And you're like, 50 k's from civilization. Like this is what I used to do back sort of when I first started. But I learned to pack really smart with the food, and also adjust to your surroundings, because there isn't much where you're riding for more than, say, 50, 60, 70 k's without a shop. Maybe for the 400 route that I put on, there's a few 120k sections without anything, which is a pretty decent amount of like a length of riding. But for most of the routes around Brisbane or southeast Queensland anyway, you got a lot of shops, so you can sort of be really smart and particular with what you bring. So you can sort of work, like say you're going for a 70k stretch, there's no reason to have that night's dinner in your bag if you don't need it. So it's like, just don't bring it. It's like you can bring enough food that you could get yourself through if for some reason you had some crazy mechanical and couldn't get into the into a shop or something by the time it's nightfall. But it's just about being smart with space and with like really calorie dense foods.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
like the chocolate bars, they take up so much room for no reason and they melt.
In Queensland they do, they don't care. I often find my stuff will freeze unless I've got it in my gelée pocket, which because I have a pocketed gelée specifically so I can carry snacks, because otherwise stuff like Cliff Bars are frozen, like literally frozen. Red Bottle frozen.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, that's a really good point. You don't need to carry. So people are really conditioned into meals, and like I'm not a lunch eater. I'll eat breakfast, but it doesn't have to be a specific breakfast thing. But I have
steak.
Oh God, no, but I don't have to have like a bowl of muesli. I'll have a thing for breakfast and dinner. But I don't in life. I don't eat lunch, so it doesn't.
You know what does go really well are the little sachets. Sorry for interrupting you, but the little sachets of like Uncle Toby's oats. Like they're really small. And say you've got like a little cup, because I just put a cup on the outside of my bag because it's it's easy, rattles around a bit, but it's really useful. And you just pour it in there with a bit of cold water if you're like don't really care, because I couldn't care less. You can even mix a bit of coffee in it, and they taste really good. So if you get like one of the honey ones, I can't do the no flavor. That's a no-go. But if you get one of like the honey ones or the maple syrup ones, like these Uncle Toby's oats are like, they're little real skinny little things, and they wrap up to like this big.
Yeah, well that's right. It's about learning what's effective, and I would say that what's effective for one person is probably effective for most people. Like I'd say that my thing about the Mars bar versus a Snickers, I would assume that a Snickers is going to be more effective for most people, but I've gone down the extent of, because often if I'm stopping in Tassie, I'm stopping at like crappy little IGAs where there's IGAs in Tassie is so bad.
They've got like the buffalo wings and
they have nothing. They're
nothing.
Meant to be like full-on supermarkets, and they'll have like 2 boxes of cereal and a can of something. And because I don't buy cooking food and I don't buy cans, because I just don't have the space, so it's got to be relatively small stuff. And so I have, if I'm really sort of pushing the distance and stuff, I'll often buy sweet biscuits, Arnott's biscuits or whatever. And so I bought I don't eat biscuits in general life. I've never bought them in normal life, but I've bought them when I'm riding a lot. And it's amazing how different the effectiveness of different biscuits are as far as like fueling. And I realized it's because some, even if you're just buying one brand of biscuits, like Arnott's biscuits, which is, ubiquitous, some have like a little bit of coconut or something in them versus some that are just sugar. And just that little bit of coconut is enough to provide fat, which makes them last really, really long. So a hot tip is a Kingston biscuit, which is looks the same as everything else. They've got coconut in them, and so they're so much more effective. So if you're buying a certain, like a tube of biscuits, it sounds like nothing, but given that I don't go through much food anyway, for me it can make the difference between cooking through biscuits in 6 hours and being okay for 18 hours. And it's the same size thing of biscuits, and it's just a combination of, and that was something I learned baptism by fire in Race to the Rock, is that if you're going for more than, for me it's about 3 or 4 days, basically some medical person will correct me, but your liver can store glycogen, or does store glycogen, and as you're exercising, you deplete your glycogen stores. And I think that happens over, I don't know what it's meant to happen over, but I'd say 2 to 3 days for me. And then basically what you're feeding in is what's going out, and it's very direct. So there's no stores in your body. So even if you've got fat, it's very difficult for your body to access fat stores. And yeah, I found that I started feeding in chocolate bars, expecting them to, last for an hour or two or whatever, and just straight in, straight out. And so I had to be really smart with managing getting enough fat as well as sugars to be given that there were no sort of stores left in my body. And look, it's a pretty extreme circumstance, but also it's basically once you strip back the first couple of layers of a couple of days of intake for your body. And for me, what worked would be if I put a bit of fruit juice in with the water in my water bottle. So for me, it's about a third of, you get an orange, apple juice, whatever from the servo, put about a third of a bottle of juice with the rest water and combine it with something like nuts, which are pretty fat heavy. And you need to have the sugar and the fat, otherwise neither will work in isolation. And, it was bizarre how different that was. And, the opposite of that scenario was I came through a place called William Creek late one night, and I'd booked accommodation there. And I arrived, they knew that I was coming, but William Creek was just a settlement with a pub, which was like, there was no service when I arrived, but they knew I was coming, so it was all good. I'd phoned ahead 2 days ahead and said, I've got to get here. They didn't have a store. Well, they had like jelly snakes and wine for sale. But I said, can I get anything from your kitchen, because you obviously do service? And they sold me a loaf of frozen bread. And for me, I was riding along, I was like, I'm a bit peckish, I'll have some frozen bread. And I was just having to stuff this down so rapidly because I had no sugar to augment the carbs and the small amounts of, I guess, protein from the seeds or whatever. And now I figured out the balance of take a bit of sugar, take a bit of fat, take a bit of protein, whatever. But it's wild, the stuff that your body does when it's stressed and you're a few days into something. And even if you're just touring, if you're not getting proper meals day to day, if you're just sort of fueling, then you'll deplete stores that you didn't even know were a thing.
Yeah.
And your body will be like, I need X, Y, Z. And if you don't give me that, I'm just going to stop.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to function. It's like if your car runs out of fuel, you just can't go anywhere.
Yeah, I've been in that situation, like body wise. I don't know, just day after day, sometimes you're just like, oh my God, like I can't go any further. There was one ride, and it was actually only a overnighter, but I'd ridden through the night, and it was solo as well. And I got like into this weird thought loop of something really bad was going to happen. So I was freaking out, and I put my headphones in, probably these headphones. I was like cranking the music because I was like, okay, I need to like change my mind. So they had like Nirvana playing or something like that, just thrashing through the speakers. And time went by and I just didn't eat. And obviously, as you know, over those sort of extended periods of time when you're pushing, because I was sort of like in this weird mindset where I was like, I've got to get to like civilization before I die. That weird, those weird thoughts, you might not have it, but I get these weird thoughts in my head that like something really bad's about to happen.
Absolutely. So it's I'm not sure what your listener base, where they're coming from exactly, as far as pushing the sleep.
They might think this is really weird.
No, but look, absolutely. So sleep deprivation is a very odd beast, and when you were asking me about like tips for bikepackers, I didn't mention this because this is not something that you generally like play with unless you're kind of racing. But sleep deprivation, you can't really prepare for without experiencing it. I've been through exactly the same stuff as you, and I still go through it. I call it's basically, you've got these
it's very hard to describe.
It's demons. You feel like this sense of impending doom, whatever the situation is. The world's going to end if you don't do X, Y, Z. You get fixated on things.
I find that like you get these sort of loops that go in your head, and you'll start thinking about it, and then you'll go really deep into it, and then you'll bounce back, and then you'll think about it again, and then you go really deep into it, and then you just keep going around and around and around until something like outside of you takes over your attention span, and you're like, oh wow, okay, I can look at that now.
Well, basically, like, when you're, again, someone medically will I'm sure have a different opinion, but when you're sleep deprived, you're kind of stripping back you're reducing the equipment you have available sensorily to like deal with stuff. So if you've got less, imagine a computer, you've got less RAM available to process something. Rather than being shit at everything, your body concentrates all of it into one avenue where it fixates. And for me, it's also impending doom. Like some people talk about getting euphoria when they're really sleep deprived. I don't get that.
You're complete opposite.
Yeah. And I think I'd suspect that's probably a lot more common to get this just sense of, oh, the world's going to end. I'm terrified. And yeah, that used to be, again, Race to the Rock. I had a really, really terrible experience where I was just, I had a stretch where I had food. I definitely had heat exhaustion. I was a bit sunburned, but it was fine. Like I was like, okay, this is fine. You know, I've had all this stuff before, but I was also very tired and I was pushing through and I just felt like the world was going to end.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, I'll just stop. You know, the sun had gone down. I'm like, I'll just stop. And I slept and then I woke up and I had some Milo and Cocoa Pops, which I'd hoarded it since wherever, with UHT milk.
Yep.
And everything was fine. You know, I'd slept, I had food.
It's not even that anything bad is actually happening. It's just that your brain, it's completely normal. It's that your brain is tricking you into thinking these things. I don't know the science behind it at all, but it's what it feels like when you look back at it. You think, what was I thinking? Like I remember specifically, it was a stretch of gravel, and I heard this dog barking really loudly, and I was like freaking out that it was going to run at me. And then not long after, because I was sort of like in and out of like a really weird sleep deprived state, so I wasn't thinking straight. Then I heard cop sirens, and I was sort of, this road was running parallel to a road, and it was just like as soon as that happened, it sort of, I don't know, you sort of get really fixated on that issue. It's like
it's just, I think it's just your brain is starved of everything, you know, sleep and nutrition stuff, and it does fixate. And I would say that, again, most people are probably, you know, approaching this podcast as I'm touring, adventuring, but if you are,
I got a few people who are pretty keen, but
sleep deprivation, you can't prepare school against that. You just have to experience it, and you will get the sense of impending doom. And for me, I've done it quite a bit now, and so when it happens, it still sucks. You know, you don't. It's not a nice place to be, but I'm like, okay, this is sleep. You know, I feel this way because of sleep. Because generally, when you feel like stuff's going to go wrong, it's because you're in a bad situation. You put yourself somewhere risky. It's your, you know, sixth sense, whatever, sensing things out. But when you're sleep deprived, it's nothing to do with that. It's totally irrational.
You know it's going to go away as well. Like once the sun comes up, you can be fine.
So it's important to go, when you start feeling like that, go, okay, is this real based on my situation, or is this perceived? And if it's perceived, it doesn't feel any less real. It still feels horrible. But you go, okay, do I need to intervene? Yes or no? Okay, no, it just sucks. And you just do it. But it's very common. It's happens to me all the time. It always happens to me when I ride this Tassie gift route, because some sadist put this horrible stretch on the last day. I don't know who would do that. It's horrible. Yeah.
It's almost like I'm staring at them right now.
No, it's me.
Well, just, I know you don't want to go into it very in depth, but just regarding the Tassie gift route, obviously it's a route that you've created. It looks awesome. I really want to go down and give it a crack. Actually, what's like a ballpark time for the whole route? Like, what would you be doing the route in?
8 days. 8 days if you're feral. 11 to 12 days if you want to move with urgency, like, and I'm talking, you know, proper big days, but sleeping. 15, 16 days if you're touring. Yeah,
for sure. And what are the stats on it?
So it's about 1,800 Ks. It's about 34,000 of climbing, which I'll just point out, the Tour Divide, which is about to happen, is I think 2,500 miles, which is
4.5 something.
Roughly.
I think it's 4.5.
4,500 Ks, is that right?
It's around that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's about 45,000 of climbing.
Yeah.
Tassie Gift is 1,800 and about 35,000 of climbing.
Yeah.
So it's about a third of the distance and 2/3 of the climbing.
Yeah, I can say that would be pretty tough.
Yeah. Look, and the thing is, it's just, for me, it's normal because it's Tasmania. It's what I'm used to riding. But there's there's very little like hiker bike. If you've got smart gearing, so I ride 2-bar gearing. I've got a 38-28 and a 40 tooth, because that's just what came out of the box.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, but basically like 12 by 12 speed 1-bar gearing with smart mountain bike gearing.
I've got the worst gearing on the gravel bike. I've got like 42 at the front.
Yeah, so that's the thing, like no
36 at the back.
Gravel bike is like, well, I don't know. So certainly brand dropping, Shimano won't get you through because they don't have the range. Shimano gravel, sorry, won't get you through because they just don't have the range.
Yeah.
But so it doesn't have to be 2-by, but like mountain bike gearing is what you want. If you do that, so for me, because the route is designed around where I like to ride and what I like to do, so over 1800 Ks, it's probably there's a hiker bike over a plain where no bike could ride, which is, I don't know, a K-ish. And there's maybe a total of a kilometre elsewhere. So 2 Ks over 1800 Ks of not rideable. It's pretty wild. Yeah. But if you have stupid gearing, then you're going to be hiking 100 Ks of it.
Yeah, because you got to remember you got bikepacking bags and stuff. Because a lot of people who are new, they don't take that into account. It's like, oh yeah, I can get up these hills. It's like, okay, now add like, for the normal person, add like, I don't know how many kilos. What would most people be running? Like 8-9 kilos of gear. Like it's
and that's the thing. Like all I can do is this route basically was. I ride everywhere in Tassie all the time. I ride all the horrible cooked places.
Yeah, I think I saw your heat map on Strava. I don't know if it was on Strava or maybe there was something. Maybe I was just looking at the actual route itself, but it went everywhere. I was like, so cool.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, Tassie has a lot of areas that are inaccessible by anything, because the terrain, the vegetation, unless someone has laid a track, you can't get through there. But we also have we have forestry, a lot of forestry in Tassie. And historically, we've also had a lot of mining, like really pioneering mines in the middle of nowhere. And we do more historical, but we also do have hydroelectric. So we've got, like power lines and stuff. So we've got heaps of service roads, and a lot of those are blocked off to vehicles, apart from, designated vehicles. And even the ones that are permitted for designated vehicles, some of them haven't been accessed for 20 years. So they're very
overgrown
intactness.
Yeah.
But there's a pretty good network of where you can get, if you're committed enough, on a bike or on foot. Because if there were not these roads or tracks laid down, you just wouldn't get there. You've got to have something established. And I go some very terrible places of my own volition on a weekend. But I realized that people in Tassie, everything's a bit slow in Tassie. We're a bit behind. The gravel scene's been established for a few years, but we're just lazy. We're slow. And people just weren't going all the places that I would go routinely just for fun every weekend. And I was like, you know what? This is just it irritated me that these were actual roads that people weren't sure about, so they wouldn't ride or they wouldn't explore. So I put together a route that I knew would work because I'd ridden it, not in one go, but I'd ridden all the bits of it.
Yeah, you put the parts together.
Yeah, it wasn't. I've always said that on a scale of like 1 to 10 of adventurousness, 1 being groomed gravel, 10 being the worst place that I would choose to take my bike, which is not riding, obviously, like terrible, but that I would persist with. The gift doesn't get worse than about a 5 or 6, and most of it's about a 3 or 4. So it's not, a sadistic thing intentionally. There's some bits that are a bit tough, but it's just generally representative of Tasmanian terrain, and it takes in what is, in my opinion, the best, most spectacular places. And if a part of it is, hard work, it exists for a reason, and it's been very well thought out. And I guess that's the benefit you get from when you're in a small environment crafting a route. You get more picky. So
you got lots to play with.
Yeah. So even if like there's big stretches of sealed stuff, but that's because there's no way to get through an area. That's the only way. But everything exists for a reason. And so that route is based around where, like, me riding on my bike, which happens to be a 2-by hardtail mountain bike gearing. if you have another gearing to that, it's a race gearing. Like I said, 38, 28, and a 40 tooth. If it's different to that, vastly different, you might have trouble. But it's not like I'm running crazy low gearing and I can ride all of it except the stuff that no one could ride. But yeah, Tassie is more remote than a map would indicate. Is all I would say. So
I'll take your advice on that one.
You can go for 3 days at 200 Ks a day without any opportunity to buy food.
Wow. All right.
And when you do buy food, it's a pack of biscuits.
you got to whip out the cheese, salami, and
whatever. So good.
It's making me hungry. Are you doing that again this year? You putting it on again? Is this
Tassie Gift will happen. No, Tassie Gift will happen. I can't guarantee that I'll ride it, but I might do.
What will it be? October again?
So it's very unofficial, but it has historically always been the first Friday in November. That starts on a Friday. So I don't even know what date that is. First Friday in November. It should still happen. The frustration for me with recurring events routes is that people are, particularly in Tasmania, people need organized events and pushing to make them happen. And that's stupid. If there's a route out there, people
they'll ride it when the event's on, but they won't ride it if their route was just there.
But even so, someone can pick up a route and create a tracking page free of charge for any route at any time. But yeah, people are weird. But anyway, so it should be independent of whether or not I might ride, but again, that's not the consideration. But yeah, so first Friday of November has historically always been when it's happened. I'm sure you can look up when that is. The rationale being that Tassie's pretty full on over winter. And then over summer we do get a lot of bushfires, and without phone communication it can get pretty sketchy. November's a good time because they're long days. It can be unpredictable weather, but it's not winter. And we have had bushfires, we have had epic snows, we've had everything. But
you get a bit of everything down there, don't you?
We do, we do.
It's the joys of living in Tassie.
Well, the first time the event happened, again at the same time of year, we had snow to start with, and then 3 days later at the highest point, or 2 days later at the highest point on the route, it was just recovering from a bushfire a week before.
Oh wow.
It's just, who knows.
That's so random.
Yeah.
It's Tassie things.
So it's a look. Tasmania is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful place. Gravel bikes are fine for that route if you have mountain bike gearing. That's all I'll say. You need 2-inch tires ideally. You need mountain bike-ish gearing, and then you'll have a great time. It doesn't matter if you're flat bar or drop bar.
But then when you sort of get to that point, it's sort of like, why are you buying a gravel bike then? Like, it's the same as a hardtail.
I know, and that's only somebody who comes from a mountain bike background would say that, because if you're something from a roadie background,
you're like, oh my god, that's crazy.
But look, but if you've got the first year there was a bloke from Victoria who's, I don't know if he has a trials background, but he had like mad bike skills, and he was running 1.8 tires, I think. And on like a pub bike, but and he just had the worst time and just dropped out after the first day. And the first day's hard, there's no question. But if he does it, then just put yourself on a monster cross type.
Well, there's little things you can do like that don't cost a whole lot of money that can convert your bike. Like, obviously you don't want to go out and buy a new bike. Like, when we're saying like, hardtails might be better suited to a lot of these rougher rides, doesn't then mean like, oh well, I'm going to sell my gravel bike now and just buy a hardtail. Because you can, little things you can do to make your riding a lot easier on a gravel bike. Like, you can lift up your stem a bit, you can double wrap your bar tape, you can run wider or more knobbly tires. You could even, if you're super cool, you could run a dropper post in it. there's lots of little things that you can do that make your bike a lot more capable, or even the other way, going from a hardtail to, like, say, a more 50 road, 50 dirt type loop. You can run skinnier tires, you can lock your suspension out, or you can get a what do you call it, rigid fork for it if you're into that.
Yeah, look at so my my partner Dan, who has a gravel bike which is spec'd for 50 mil tires. So he went from he's a mountain biker and a road cyclist and didn't sort of split the difference, and then has watched me for years but is not into the sleeping inches thing. He likes to ride really fast, and then I happened to pick up this one bike on the market that I was like, hey, if I was to buy a gravel bike, it would be this, but I hate gravel bikes. And then he bought that. It's spec'd for 50 mil tires, but so I happen to run a Vittoria Mescal on my my bike packer, my hardtail. I love those tires. I just can't recommend them highly enough. They come in all sorts of widths, but they tend to run a little narrower than other equivalent tires, and they do a 2.1, which I think is meant to be a 52 mil. And his bike spec to a 50 mil, but I was like, look, you know what? They run narrow. I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
He chucked that under his gravel bike, and the big difference is it's a mountain bike tire versus a gravel bike tire, and they're vastly different.
It's meant to do really technical stuff and hold up.
Yeah,
to really
that's right. They're
stuff.
actual like knobs, not like small like token things.
And it's also the positioning of them. They're meant for that sort of riding.
Yeah. So he went from a 50 mil gravel tire to a 52 mil mountain bike tire, and he's faster on every surface under, like, a road climb, rail trail, up and back down the road. He's faster on the mountain bike tire. And it's because there's a few bumps and a few corners on the rail trail. So there's things that you can do that probably buck the trend of what you're meant to do or what's trendy. But I guess coming from, both of us come from a mountain bike background. I've done enough trials on different types of tires to know what works for me. Depends on who you are, your type of riding, your service, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you on that. So we both seem to agree really, I think really strongly about the whole, that whole topic. But I know a lot of, I don't know, maybe some people just like the gravel bike better. They might like the positioning of it. They might like having the different handle positions. And I guess on some of those more like monster cross type bikes, you can run it like a hardtail. Then in my mind, it still goes back to the whole, this is a hardtail bike, type argument.
Yeah.
But I guess they must.
Though, but I've had a lot of experience with tracks, roads, where I go, okay, do I, long 60, 80 Ks slow riding, where I go, do I let my tires down or do I unlock my fork, for example? Like, that's a consideration. This is like long races. And I've found that in most cases, locking my fork, deflating my tires is a better option. But then if my knees are getting really sore, like my iliotibial, my ITB is getting tight and stuff, and I really need to look after my joints and stuff, then the best thing I can possibly do for nursing my body is to unlock my fork, and I can inflate my tires then to whatever, because I can bounce my way up a hill. I can grind when it's,
of course.
And it's amazing how much, like, effort you can save your body. You're not going as fast, sure, but if your ultimate goal is not a one-day race, but going as fast as you can over multiple days, or even just going as comfortable as you can over multiple days, then just having the versatility of having a fork there. And again, back when I started doing this stuff in 2018, when things were less like common in Australia, when I was riding to Race to the Rock, riding on my way to Uluru. So I'm pretty old now. I just turned 34, but I was
so old.
I know. So what is it, 29 or 30 at the time, whatever. And my mum at home was like nervous about, was I going to die? And there was a bit of speculation on the social medias about, oh, you can't ride a suspension fork, like doing this sort of stuff, because a suspension fork will fail because they're not meant to deal with all the corrugations and the dust.
I don't think I've seen the stuff that I've taken my suspension fork down. I don't know.
Well, I think all you need to do is watch the Fink trail bike riding races, and Fox suspension.
Fox
They're
suspension
different.
is
yeah.
It's a different breed.
So basically, while I was riding there, a lot of people were saying a carbon bike will fail, break. Suspension fork will fail because of corrugation, dust, or whatever. No one, like, you can't ride with flat bars because you've only got one position. I had TT bars, but I hardly ever use them.
Probably also didn't you have the handlebar ends as well?
Yeah, like
the little antlers.
I love bar ends. Yeah,
they're
definitely.
So good.
You need bar ends. Yeah, best. Yeah. So, but back then it was just not a very common thing in Australia that you would ride flat bar, suspension fork, and a carbon frame if you were doing long distance bikepacking. You just wouldn't do it. And because I come from a not bikepacking background, obviously those were the bikes I rode. I rode carbon frames, blah, blah, blah. But I was really nervous, and my mum was really nervous, and she was calling me and they're like, "Oh, you've got to come home. You've got to catch a bus from wherever the hell you are because your bike's going to fail." It's really not,
Have they even ridden carbon bikes? Like,
yeah. Well, yeah, like, I'm not trying to badmouth people, but there was a bit of speculation. And yeah, no, everything's fine. And it continues to be fine. And I continue to service my fork 10 times the recommended service interval. Not 100 hours, 1,000 hours, or whatever. My frame continues to not break. I continue to have zero issues with hand position.
I think there's a lot of there's a weird mindset about carbon and people thinking that it cracks really easy. It's like, even if you do crack it, you still ride a long way with a cracked frame. Like it's not.
I said, I've literally had 2 carbon frames break, and that shouldn't be an indication of what carbon does. I've just been the world's most unlucky person to have, I'm a very light, very conservative rider, and I've had 2 frames, basically lemons from new, but I've also had a very large number of very massive crashes. Like this one I was talking about semi-recently, where I was on my hardtail, my bikepacker, took a massive spill. I was doing about 50 k's an hour down a really rough forestry road. I hit a washout. I saw the washout coming, but I got sort of funneled into the washout on the side, which was a long trail one. Because I've only got 650 wheels, I couldn't quite bounce out of it. So I just knew that
with the bags as well, the extra weight, it's real hard.
Yeah, and so I knew that I knew I was going to crash, and I knew it was only a matter of time. So I was just trying to wash off as much speed as I could. I was just bumping along, and then I had just had a massive over the bars, and so my bike went flying through the air. I went flying through the air. I took a massive scorpion smack on my back. I was very fortunate. I punched some rocks into my back, but I think they avoided my organ. So I just got some very, very bad bruising. My bike went flying through the air. I completely collapsed my saddle. Completely, this is a steel saddle rail, folded.
Wow.
Because the bike landed on that.
Yeah.
And broke a spoke, whatever. But it was basically all the impact. Went through. The bike was fine. And this is my bike. My current frame weighs 820 grams. That's my bike. It's fine.
Yeah. No, so, they are very strong in certain ways.
Yeah, I think it's there's certainly just, they say, run what you brung, whatever you've got, make it work. But if you're buying new, I'd always opt for comfort as your first port of call, and then you can decide what kind of rider you are based around that. Because you don't really know until you don't know if you want to do the stupid stuff that I do, where I'm just bush bashing through crap and having half a tree through my wheel constantly, or if you want to ride green gravel roads,
or if you want to tour,
that's right. And there's no right or wrong, and sometimes I wish that what I enjoyed doing was riding green gravel, but I think because I'm in a small area, I've done all that, so I'm almost like, oh, what's there, and so I just
always
keep
reaching
riding
out,
more and more horrible stuff.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up shortly, but I just want to ask one more question. So if you could listen, well, I know you started off the podcast saying you don't enjoy listening to podcasts, but if there was someone that you would like to have on this podcast, who would it be?
Oh man.
Who would you like to listen to?
I don't listen to podcasts. Look, I know, so Kurt Refsnyder, I know that he doesn't, I know that he probably does a lot of podcasts, but I've not listened to any of them. But he's a dude over in, he's probably not in Arizona, but he's in that type of area in the US. He's
the Arizona vibes.
yeah. No, he's a very good bike pack racer, but also like a route creator. He's a coach, coaches a lot of really top endurance riders. Very smart guy as well. I think he's maybe a geologist. He's an academic. He does like lecturing and stuff.
Right.
But he's a really smart, lovely guy. Does a lot of really sort of inspirational writing, interesting approach to training and equipment. And he has a saying, which I know I'm going to be misquoting, but something along the lines of get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll be fine. That's yeah. So yeah, he's a dude who, I'm not going to say I'm going to listen to it because I don't listen to anyone's, but I think he'd be a really, really good guy to get on. Cool. And he amongst other people I know, he coaches Kate Boyle, who recently took the 24-hour mountain bike world champs, amongst many other people. I'll
have to investigate.
It sounds like you've got a bit of a all-star cast of people already lined up. So
no, it's exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on to chat. It was I know we went down a few little rabbit holes, but I'll definitely listen back on it and I'll be like, oh, actually, you know what? It's a really good idea. I might implement that into my bikepacking strategy, Well,
I kind of assume you'd be cutting this, but
Yeah, parts of it.
If you don't, then it's not my fault.
No, I'll definitely be cutting parts of it. Like this one. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, Emma, and I hope you have a good week and it's not too cold down there and you don't freeze to death or anything.
Oh, it is. I'll get out there. Thanks. Nice to see you, mate.
Yeah, I was nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah.